Hi, it's Amanda DiVito Parle. Welcome to my podcast, At the Kitchen Table, where we will guide, inspire, and connect. My name is Amanda DiVito Parle, and I'm a second-generation real estate agent. I'm a mom of 3 young children. I'm married to Ryan Parle, and I run a very small but mighty real estate team called the DiVito Dreammakers, which was founded by my dad and our family business. What I want from the podcast is just an opportunity to share my knowledge. Somehow I've accomplished things that I just sort of like put a path down and I wanted to accomplish, but I am beginning to realize that there's probably more extraordinary in that than ordinary. And I think at some point in your career, you begin to realize that people are like, I wish that I could, have a camera on you and capture sort of some of the essence of what you're telling me, because I just can't articulate it quite the way that you do. So for me, the journey of starting the podcast was a little bit of just being able to get it out, right? Like to say the things that I had sort of wanted to say, but also that I had found this career that I found myself in mastery in, and I want to talk about it. I like to talk, and I like to connect with people, and I like to share, and I do feel like an open book. For me, the business of real estate, I just feel like I could talk about it all day. And so the content felt very natural for me, something I felt like I could do over and over and over again. And then I know the industry so well that I could find these interesting people to interview and different topics that I think are helpful, and just a way to get what's in my brain out, basically. But for me, this was just really a journey to expose information, to expose more people, particularly people with sort of a growing interest in real estate, to concepts of the business. And my hope is that somebody can sort of digest this content, and somebody at a very junior level would be able to digest something that was really great, and somebody that is at a very sort of senior level or at a higher level place in their real estate journey, whether that be because they're in the business or because they work in an industry that circles the business, or because they're an investor or have an interest in the business, or just a regular home buyer and seller with an interest in real estate. So my hope actually is that I can catch a broad audience, because the truth of the matter is in America, everybody can and should be a homeowner. And that's the beauty of the opportunity, is that I want it to be accessible, and I want people to be able to learn about these things. And I just want to be able to give the gift of helping people know what I know. The business of real estate is very entrepreneurial as any industry left in America today. The people I am choosing for the podcast, in some ways, are the people who are right in front of you right now, who've been influential, the people that have been long-standing in my life, that I still have sort of access to, both in friendships and in business relationships and in my spheres of influence and in my circles. And so going to those people who made an impact in my life, that was a great place to start. And I just think what I've realized about this business is you can create little hurricanes. It's I take the real estate business as an example. I can take a little hurricane and realize it becomes a big hurricane. It can become a big hurricane in my business. And I do think the podcast will be like that too, where it can just be this little thing where you invite the people in who are closest to you, who've made the most impact. And in that will be these other opportunities for there just to be more there. And so I have this awareness that the podcast is little and it's in its infancy. And my real estate business is not. It's the opposite. And so my real estate business is in this big hurricane that has this sort of self-sustaining winds, right, that can swirl around the eye of the storm, essentially. And eventually the podcast will be however big I want the business to be, or however big you grow it. My parents were ski bums from the south side of Chicago. And my mom and dad both grew up what I would say is poor, south side of Chicago. My dad's family was Italian immigrants. And my grandmother cut a newspaper clipping out for a ski club and gave it to what was my 20-year-old mom at the time and said, "You should go to this ski club." And so when my mom and her best girlfriend decided to go to this little ski club meeting, and when they got there, my dad was there, and he was super cool because he was going to be going to Colorado to go skiing at Aspen. And my mom was super impressed with that. She thought that was really cool. They were married in February of 71, and sold everything they owned, bought a Winnebago, and drove to a little ski town in 1971 called Steamboat Springs, Colorado. So when they got there, though, the work was ditch digging. And so they parked their Winnebagos down by the river and started working digging ditches in like the winter of 1971. And he started an electrical contracting business in Steamboat Springs. And they bought a little condo mountainside at the time for $25,000 furnished. And they lived there with a dog and a business and a new baby. My oldest brother was born in 74. My dad was running an electrical contracting business at that time then. And my parents stayed in Steamboat for 15 years. So my brothers and I were all born in Steamboat. The snow in Steamboat was horrible. By the end of winter, you had dug yourself out of like 8 feet of snow. And my mom just remembers saying there was no McDonald's, there was no Walmart, there was no place to go. And so my mom and dad bought a house down here in what was horse property in West Arvada. It was actually a golden address at the time. When they were buying that house, they realized that they'd gotten caught in a real estate lawsuit. The seller of the property tried to sell that house to somebody else, and they had to hire a real estate attorney and fight for the house to move the family of 5 that had already moved in it out to move their family in. And so at that time, my mom and dad had gone through a bad real estate experience. That was in the summer of 1984. My dad said to my mom, "Sue, you should get into real estate." And she said, "You get into real estate." And that's just what he did. And so my dad got into real estate in 1986 when the market was terrible. Interest rates were very high. The market was very depressed. Oh, the real estate industry is so cutthroat. It's so difficult. And, I watched my dad persistently keep working at the business almost no matter the market conditions. So my dad was, an entrepreneur who had left the south side of Chicago via Steamboat Springs. And by 1990, he was here working at the Remax West in West Arvada and had, sort of launched a career in real estate. So that sort of set the path for, how I ended up in real estate. The story of my parents' journey to Steamboat Springs, I actually think is sort of a generational thing about how in one generation, somebody can grow up poor to basically become wealthy. So I'm the youngest of 3. I have 2 older brothers, and we grew up in really what I would say is a very idyllic life on horse property in Golden, Colorado. My parents are still married. They're married 52 years. And, that's a lot of lessons about just love and friendship and making things work. And, my parents really showed me that, life is not easy, nor is it perfect. Marriage is not easy, nor is it perfect. So they really set a nice example for us about how to just live fully and be happy and, the value of raising kids and having a nice life. And so my folks have set such a lovely example. My parents knew I was going to be in real estate before I knew I was going to be in real estate. So while they were busy planning for me, I was busy thinking I was going to be like fashion designer or something. I don't know what I thought I was going to do there, but I certainly know when I got to CSU and I was humbled by the hard work that is college, and I did not cut very good grades the first semester of college, I wasn't going to get a business degree. So I met with my counselor my freshman year of college, and I said, I don't think I can do 4 tests in one semester and make it. And she said, well, why don't you do something more applied where you can go into the School of Applied Sciences and do something that's, maybe more of a life skill. And I said, well, show me what those options are. And I landed in a fashion merchandising program at CSU, which was fantastic. I was creative. I was smart. I was street smart, but not book smart. And so I ended up, with 4 projects and 4 tests a year got me through college. That was sort of the way I could stumble through. I wouldn't say I had an interest in merchandising or in the business of the fashion industry, nor did I don't think people who knew me would say I had an interest in fashion, but you'd be surprised how closely that actually ended up tying into real estate. There's a lot of marketing in there. There's a lot of business in there. There's a lot of sort of selling the self, right, between the 2 industries, which in real estate, you end up sort of having to sort of be the person that people are hiring. And so you're selling yourself to them because it's sort of a service industry. So that ended up being just great, practical, footwork for me to do a fashion degree at CSU. And I think college is like 75% the experience, 25% the education. And so certainly for me, coming out of that experience between 18 and 22, you grow up a lot. And so I know coming out of college, at that point, I had decided I was going to not go to New York and work in the fashion industry because I saw my peers leaving college to do that. And I thought, well, that is not going to work. So I sat for the real estate test because that felt like the next natural thing for me to do. So I sat for the real estate test and I moved home. And I started saving some money. I bought a car I couldn't afford. And I just decided I was going to go hustle real estate. And I think one of the best things that actually happened for me very early in my career was my dad left the country for 10 days to go on a trip. And this was before cell phones and Wi-Fi and the internet. I had had my real estate license for like 40 days, I think. And my dad was leaving the country and I was being left behind to cover the business. At the time he left, he had 12 or 13 properties under contract, which was a lot. And so he left the country with 12 properties under contract, and I was the rookie left behind to navigate these deals. And I remember feeling like that was a trial by fire that I needed to just like launch into my own confidence. And so in some ways, I always jokingly tell mentors, like if you can just leave the young broker to handle hard things, they learn by trial by fire. And so I know for sure for me, I got some at-bats while my dad was gone that I don't know that I would have had while he was here in the country. So they came back from vacation and everything survived. And I realized I had held it all together and the deals all kind of stayed together the way they were supposed to. And I realized I had the confidence at that point that I could keep going and be a good broker. You realize these juvenile decisions you set out to make early in your life. And then when you actually finally get to them, you're like, wow, I did the thing that I set out to do. And that's cool. Yeah. I mean, memorable moments, the real stuff I'm going to remember is the days I had my babies and my wedding day and traveling with my family and playing games and life's experiences and buying our first rental property and buying our home in the mountains and my brothers having kids. And that's the stuff I'm going to remember. Those are the big accomplishments for me. So I named my company The Big Accomplishment at 22. The funny thing about The Big Accomplishment is that I had a young employee. His name was John Maselli. He was the cousin of a friend of mine. And he was running errands for us 5 hours a week. And he used to call me Commanda. And he also called me Demanda. So depending on the day, he would come in and he would say, Commanda, what do I need to do today? And he was hilarious. He was a magician. He used to come in walking on his hands. And he was just a funny, kind of quirky guy. And so he had these nicknames for all of us. And mine was Commanda or Demanda or whatever he called me. And so the joke around the office was that I was going to name the business The Big Accomplishment. And so in short form, you would call it The Big A. And John would come into the office walking on his hands or whatever he was doing. And he would say, oh, you had the big A all right around here. And he'd say, agent, asshole, agent, accomplishment. And we'd all laugh. And so the joke was the big A. And so we kind of laughed about how The Big Accomplishment, abbreviated down to the big A, turned out to sort of be a joke because it's A for asshole, no A for agent. No, it's really The Big Accomplishment. And so my spicy temperament earned me that. Oh, I have so much advice. Oh my gosh, you want to go there? Yeah. Okay. There are a couple of anchor pieces of advice that I feel like I have held on to. One of those that particularly stands out just in this conversation was that my very, very first month in the business, top producing agent, his name's Les Fenning, real good friend of my dad's, had been in real estate forever, came down to my office and he was big, tall, nice looking man, always wore slacks, and he crossed his legs and he was sitting at the edge of my desk and he said, if I could give you one piece of advice, it would be to buy one piece of real estate for every year that you're in this business. And you're 22, you could retire by 40 rich. And I remember thinking, I don't even know how to buy one house, let alone one a year. But it was almost a challenge. He was so successful and he was so influential in my life that I look back and think, oh, he was challenging me. That was really good advice that Les Fenning gave me, to buy a piece of real estate every year. It's funny though, because I think my dad must have told me that, but I heard it coming from Les differently than I heard it coming from my dad. You know, along the way, I feel like at almost every seminar I ever went to, people had like a really smart tribe around them. And anytime I looked around, my friends were doing really important things. And so at some point I realized that my very best girlfriends, the people I had surrounded myself with the most, were successful people. And I think in a way, this really tight friend group that I had, but every time I turned around, they were doing something important, and they were getting promotions, or they were, getting married and having families and doing the things that mattered. My girlfriends and I sort of all kept each other accountable, and we all sort of kept moving forward and doing important things. And in a way, that accountability, that really deep friendship, was so important to me, because I don't know that I would have kept going without somebody sort of to chase, right? Like somebody else doing an important thing that I felt like I kind of had to keep up with. And so I do think that there's this importance to having this tribe around you of maybe smarter people than you. And I know for sure my best girlfriends, actually every one of them, I think are smarter than I am. And we all sort of brought this different strength to our friend group. And that was super important to me, because one friend I knew I could call for advice anytime, and she'd shoot super straight with me and say don't make that hire, or don't start that part of your company now, or go for it. I think you can do it. And so I think this having a deep, authentic friendship with my girlfriends gave me the confidence to go forward when it was time to go forward, and sort of told me when not to do things. Somebody truly that can say to you bad idea, don't do that now. But I will say Ryan Parle, my husband, was like that too. My husband basically never pulled the reins back on me. The relationship, the dynamics of my marriage was super important to my success, because my husband let me run. He was game for almost anything. He was almost down for all of it, except when I was running too hard, too fast, for too long. So, having those people in your life, I think, actually matters. So some of the advice I got along the way actually was sometimes you're given advice to go faster, and sometimes you're given advice to slow down. And I would say, for me, I needed more advice to slow down. I needed people to say, smell the roses a little bit, take some time, take some vacation. The older you get, the more the lessons become sort of more impactful. Two of my very best girlfriends lost their moms. And it was only until, they lost a parent that your girlfriends can sit you down and say hey, you really should enjoy your parents while they're still here. Or, hey, you should really spend some more time with your kids while they're little. And so having people in your life that can sort of see your life from the outside in, I mean, those are always great people to surround yourself with. And I would say much of my success has to do with really a great relationship with my family throughout the years, and having a really solid friend group. And then I've had some of the most amazing staff in this business. I mean it. Having good people around you who will, support you in your ideas. And then sometimes to say, hey, that's not going to work for the business right now. No. Being told no is almost important sometimes as being told yes. And so, that success and failure certainly has been good advice for me when people have sort of given me the reins and then pulled me back in. At the Kitchen Table podcast, for me, is one piece of just this knowledge and learning journey that I feel could be just a great tool. I think, this is my 21st year in the business, and at 21 years of actually practicing real estate is a lot of time to practice. And so I actually am excited about this opportunity to maybe take what I know to a broader audience, either in the form of a speaking engagements, in the form of the podcast. I like to think I have a couple of books in me. I'd like to get those out. And so the idea was that if I can go on this new journey to do this podcast and maybe write that book, and to maybe go speak and go to other real estate companies all over the country and expose sort of what I've learned along the way, maybe that will help somebody else.